Discuss possible action on the July 12th meeting minutes of the St. Croix EMS Commission. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes presented.
Second.
Motion been made and second to approve the minutes as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Financial report.
Good morning.
Good morning, Brenda.
I gave you this morning the August 2018 financial report. There's not much to outline unless you have specific questions. Call volumes through August 2018 are 1,143 compared to 1,173 billed last year through August. And then on the statement of revenue and expenditures on page 2, we do continue to have the salary savings through August. It's at $80,000. I've been monitoring that through September, and that $80,000 hasn't increased. It hasn't decreased. It's stayed at that $80,000.
Okay.
On the cash flow, on page 3, there's a change in the cash from last year to this year of $69,000 year to date, and that's just the difference in the capital outlay.
Okay.
Any specific questions?
No? Anybody else? Any questions of the financial report as of right now? Good. Thank you very much. Ad hoc committee update. Do we have anybody here to do it?
No, there's an update in your packet, though.
Okay. Any questions about the ad hoc committee's update? We'll move on then to update on the RFP for the billing company. Have we got a reply from them? Do we have a contract, you know?
The RFP for the
billing
billing company?
Do we have a contract with them yet or not?
We did get a contract finally about 4 weeks ago. I sent it back to the billing company 2 weeks ago. Catherine reviewed it, I reviewed it, and I sent a follow-up email last Friday and haven't heard back, so I will call the president of the billing company today and see where that's at.
Did you guys make changes then, I'm assuming?
We did. Yep,
Okay.
There were some changes, and it was just basically adding some language that was in our last billing contract that had gotten removed. I think just
Okay, didn't
two
get put
people
in.
looking at it differently, so
Okay.
we put those back in.
Okay,
Thank you.
so we put it on the agenda for next meeting too. RFP on the update of the facilities. That's on hold, I assume.
That is, are we skipping 5?
Oh, non-renewal. I went to the ad hoc committee. Discuss the possible action and non-renewal of ambulance contracts. Or how do we want to handle that? I would suggest that each partner talk about where they're at in their process. That would be the easiest way to handle it. I can start out. Part of my problem is I've been out of the country for the last 3.5 weeks, and all of my information is from Jeff Johnson through text. I talked to him briefly yesterday. I've seen a letter that Lakeview is working out with the town of Hudson and working toward a contract. We're having a meeting this afternoon at 1 o'clock to draft the final letter to send to the city to opt out of our contract. The discussions we will have now was whether we can have 2 contracts if the city won't allow us out of the contract. I don't see an issue to that. Troy, as an example, Warren already has a contract with other services. You got 2, you got one with River Falls and one with Hudson. So more than one contract isn't an issue. The only option I would consider a concern for the city would be if you leave the partners in and don't let them out, and they opt out, that means that we have, because we'll have skin in the game, we'll have to pay. You're going to have us voting on the budgets that are going forward for the next 4 years, and I don't know if the city wants that. You know,
When you say letting out of the contract, what kind of time frame are you talking?
the end of 2018. So the way the contract...
3 months. In 3 months.
Yes, the way the contract reads, and it always has, is we had to notify the city by the end of September that we wanted out of the contract. And it's
Out of
a
the rolling
Out of the
contract.
rolling 5-year contract.
Right.
And so if we send a letter to the clerk by Friday of this week telling them we're opting out, that puts the city into the condition to consider whether they want to allow the town of Hudson to opt out of the contract or not. And then if you choose not to, that means that we will be voting members and part of the commission, even though we would probably go with a full contract with Lakeview to provide the services for us. So you would reduce the services, but yet we would have to pay per capita is the way I assume it. But, so we would have be a voting member on the commission and be members of the commission if you don't let us out of the contract. And yet, I don't know, and I've heard discussions that would there be a concern that the city would be sued by the partners, and I've not heard any of that discussion anywhere within the town of Hudson for breach of contract, not providing the services of pickup because we're having somebody else provide it. Because we would opt into St. Croix County to provide the services for pickup with the 911 dispatching for the town of Hudson through Lakeview rather than St. Croix EMS. And that's where we're at right now. You want to go next, Stan?
We're just, we're gonna send the letter to opt out, and we're also interested in getting, in having it waived at the end of this year, but, that's up, up to your council. I mean, for the same reasons that Tim said. Yeah, we don't know where anything's at, so we've got to, it's the only thing we can do.
So your timing, Stan, is that the village of North Hudson would want to opt out by
December 31st.
in 3 months.
Yeah,
Yes.
the end of the deal. I mean,
Does your letter state that?
It does. And we've had it looked at by the lawyers and stuff, so it'll be certified mail. I think it was sent either yesterday or it'll be sent this morning.
We already received a letter
Oh, you
from
did?
the town of Troy, which simply says, they're not renewing for the rolling 50 year. The villages said that, they understand what the contract says, and if this city has interest in cutting the contract at an earlier date, that we need to contact the village.
Okay.
Yours did not say, yours just simply
Right,
said.
it shouldn't.
Right. Yours simply said, it'll now be done at the end of 2022 instead of
Right.
2023.
Right.
So we did receive those two, and obviously
Okay.
we know where
And because we're meeting at
Correct.
1 o'clock today to...
But I just wanted to update everybody what that the clerk has
Okay,
received so far.
okay.
Okay. I think essentially you know where Troy stands.
Yeah.
We sent a letter
You already
that we
sent the
opt out
letter.
in 4 years and 3 months or whatever it is left on the contract.
So your time frame is not within the next 3 months.
Right.
Unless you want to allow them to opt out.
I don't think that's what they're asking
No,
for. Is
we-
that what you're asking for?
But it would be the city's consideration.
You know, it
If
says
they're
that.
not, if
we
they're not
haven't-
asking to,
Wait a minute.
why would it be our consideration?
We have not asked for that in our letter.
Okay.
We have not discussed that. That is not what we voted for.
Okay.
We learned after we voted that you two were doing that, and that we might possibly, but I'm not sure that we haven't voted on that part.
Okay.
And so therefore, that's not,
Okay,
that's not in our letter,
okay,
and that's where we stand right now.
okay.
No, we would have to revote also if the city would allow it, because we discussed it, but we voted just to send the letter to, for the opt-out, so.
But your letter says the intent
Letter
is in
says
3
if
months.
the city is amenable to it, then we would do that.
And I'll back up a little bit because of the fact that there's no contract been offered from Lakeview yet. Okay? That's part of the issue. And as I read the letter from Lakeview, it's got some of the same issues that we had when the city was trying to move toward it with Lakeview, is there's a lot of overall discussion about whether this is working, that'll work, and it's pages long, and yet it really, at the bottom of the end of the day, it doesn't say a whole lot. I'm sorry, it just doesn't.
So you're suggesting opting out within 3 months, but you do not have a contract? Is that a fair statement? Agreed upon contract?
Well, if I could, my understanding is Lakeview's intention is not to offer a contract. I mean, if they're asked to, we'll be more than happy to help.
They are being asked to.
Okay.
They are.
Because you need to contract by law, correct?
Right, we need a contract by the end of the year. And so our discussions with Lakeview at this point is to have that. At this point, Jeff told me yesterday afternoon that they couldn't provide a contract by Friday of this week. And that would be the one where you'd have said in the letter that we want to be out by December 31st, and therefore we want, because we have a contract with Lakeview at January 1st of 2019. We do not. We don't have any contract in place, and therefore you can't tell the city that we want out completely. We'd like to consider that, is what the letter will say, because we're working toward a contract with Lakeview where we will. The townships have to have service by state law,
By
statute.
correct.
Right, so they could opt out no matter what.
Right.
We have to
Village
have a
doesn't need the
contract.
right?
Right.
So Lakeview has not proactively offered a contract. However, in the spirit of helping the community and that kind of thing, if a contract is asked for, they or anyone else will be more than happy to do so.
It is being discussed and asked for. And I've
I
seen the
just wanted to
second
clarify
letter.
that you don't have like
We
an
don't
agreed
have that
upon
yet. And that letter
contract.
says we're working toward that with the town of Hudson from Lakeview, but not a contract yet. And I don't know.
And you're
I'm
looking-
not part of those discussions, so I
Okay.
don't know why that hasn't happened, Bill. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I just wanted to make sure that what you're asking for the city is to disband potentially the contract by December 31st without another contract by the town of Hudson in place already.
That's correct.
That seems a little, I mean,
But
myself in your shoes, that seems a little,
Do you understand why? You don't. Because the contract says that you have to notify the city by the September 30th of the
Correct.
coming year automatically, otherwise it becomes a rolling 5-year contract. So you have to opt out prior to, and so this all came up rapidly 5-6 weeks ago that we were going to consider it. There'd been discussions earlier apparently, but I didn't know anything about them up to this point. That all happened in the last 4 to 5 weeks, and therefore they just haven't. And with the difficulty with the article in the paper, Lakeview wanted to step back just a little bit and said, we're concerned, don't want to make it look bad for the hospital and the community, that if there's some concerns because of the way that came into the paper, and apparently now that he's gone, the talks are moving forward again. Okay? But we don't have a contract. But we have to notify you before the end of September that we want to consider being opting out. It's one of them catch-22s.
But I think what I could say is, obviously I don't work for Lakeview, but I think I could say this, that, I mean, they can respond very quickly. I have
Yes.
no concerns whatsoever that they'd be able to get services up and running by that time frame.
And everything I'm hearing, that will happen by the end of the year, by December 31st.
okay. Are you aware that Lakeview will place an ambulance at Hudson Hospital?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And in that letter, it says that.
Okay.
At least one
Right.
ambulance, and so I read that saying, depending on what other partners, they'll look at the call volumes and decide whether they need more than one and 2 paramedics on that truck or not. It talks about all the training for the first responders and everything will be in place by Lakeview. It does all of that and discusses all of that.
Right.
But,
Because you have about, what, 200 calls a year
yeah,
in the town?
yeah.
Do you know if Lakeview will start taking transfers because of this move?
Yes, I do know that. That was
Okay.
discussed 6 weeks ago. If they were going to do it, they would take all the transfers out of Hudson Hospital.
Now contractually, let me interject. Contractually, the first call goes to St. Croix EMS per
No, it
Hudson
does not.
Hospital, correct?
No, it does not.
I thought that was a
No,
contract.
it does not. We do not have a contract. In St. Croix County, we have no rights to any of those transfers. We're an open
Technically
area.
and legally, Lakeview could start taking transfers in a facility, that type of thing,
That's
if
not
they
a
wanted to.
contractual agreement.
Okay,
But they've chosen not to.
Correct.
Just to maintain the spirit of the relationship with St. Croix EMS and such, so.
okay. Do you see this as a change with the relation? I know you can't speak for Lakeview, but
Do I see it as a,
change to
Can
the
I
relationship?
back up and help this
Yes,
conversation?
absolutely.
That all happened because John Moeller told me when I called him the first time when Jeff wanted to know, why don't you visit with him? It looks positive. And John, I thought this was going to take a 10-minute conversation. It'll be done. It took over an hour. And I asked John every question that I had, and he had an answer to everything, including were they going to take the transfers. And I won't quite use the verbiage that John used, but Lakeview made it real clear that if the city is selling the service to regions, there's no darn way, and that was a different verb, that the Lakeview Hospital will allow a competitor to move their patients out of their hospital, and therefore they would start taking all the transfers. And when I told Joyce that, when she called me to say, are you breaking your contract? I says, no, we're just considering an opview, and told her what John said, and Joyce went, well, we haven't made that decision yet. We haven't made that decision yet, which told me that what John had heard was absolutely correct, Bill. The city is making some considerations to selling the services to Lakes Regions. That's where that came from. Not because they decided they just wanted to do this. It was because the city had made some consideration that the ad hoc committee was moving in that direction, Devin.
Well, I mean, that may be the ad hoc committee, but there's been no discussions at the council level.
But
Nothing at all.
Or at the
apparently there's
administrative level.
But apparently there was enough rumblings that Lakeview got concerned.
Okay, well, I'm just to clarify though,
Yeah,
there's been no
but that's
discussion at the
That's
council
what
level.
drove it. So the ad hoc committee, I'm sorry,
Okay, I'm just
has
gonna.
been a concern,
Okay.
both
But-
for our group and the council, as far as I'm concerned. They've
But-
done some things that aren't necessarily in the good direction of St. Croix EMS. Sorry.
But
That's
on-
my
We
interpretation.
have not had.
The city
personal.
council has not had any discussion, the
conversation.
administration's not had any discussion, so,
But that's what drove it, just so you know.
but I just want to make that clear, that
Yeah.
what was said at the ad hoc committee was said at the ad hoc committee, but there's been no discussion at the council level or
So if this is the
administratively about that.
discussion with one person, that's one thing.
Don't know. But it made it all the way to Lakeview. Didn't come through here. It went through whomever within St. Croix EMS or whomever. It got to Lakeview and got up through the ranks.
Okay, what got to Lakeview? The
That
sale
the
of this,
That
sale
member,
of St. Croix EMS to what?
Lakes Regions,
Lakes Region.
which is a competitor
Okay,
to Lakeview.
okay.
The ad hoc committee did meet with Lakes
They
Regions.
did. And they were real positive, she said. So I just assumed that must have been where some of that discussion occurred. And I knew that at one point, like 5 years or 8 years ago, I don't know when it was, Devin, they'd given a proposal to the city of Hudson, which just never went anywhere.
When we were the last, when Kenny resigned.
Yeah.
And there was discussion about how to continue.
They had proposed it,
We got a letter from the commission.
and it just never, ever went anywhere. So I knew that there was a potential that they might be interested, and so I wasn't shocked when John told me what he said. And I get it. If it was my company and we were running a service, and you wouldn't want your competitor hauling your patients out of your hospital. You know, I get it. So that's what drove that decision to move forward.
So what are your reasons to leave St. Croix EMS?
Money.
If I may ask.
Money. Strictly money.
Strictly money.
147,000.
Yes.
Can't do much road work for 147,000.
No, it's not the 147,000, Susan.
Suzanne,
Suzanne, excuse me. It's the 294,000.
you're paying
You
147,000.
bet, double it. That's what we're looking at the end of 5 years.
That was an old projection. I'd like to see a new one.
It ain't gonna matter.
It would
And
if
part
it
of
was
the,
lower.
no, it would, and here's the reason it would. I do believe, in one of the discussions last meeting with Brandon, was we're continually having, and I don't want to get into all the politics of the hiring or any of that stuff. We keep losing paramedics and EMTs because of the salary pay. And we train them and they leave. We train them and they leave, which means it's pay. Which means if you raise, and so the ad hoc committee's looking at going to the Baldwin rate, which means if we weren't even going to be able to hire them at the Baldwin rate because they're too close to the Twin Cities. So if you start paying higher wages, that per capita cost has to go up. And the ad hoc committee was instructed to look for ways to reduce cost, and that they found nothing that would do that in their interpretation that there was available. And I suspected that was going to happen. Therefore, that budget of, and to show you nationwide, St. Croix, EMS services are struggling paying the bills. And therefore, $34 per capita is not an expensive number. There's numbers out there in the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s per capita. So to say that it's going to end up at 34, no, it will not. All budgets are guess, your best guess at the time it happens. It'll be something plus or minus that, I would assume, but it's still got the potential to double. And unless you, and these are a quote from Dean Knudsen, unless you change the political party in the state of Wisconsin, you will not see levy limits end in the state of Wisconsin. They've been in place for 14 years. We cannot raise the levy, and you cannot borrow money for operating cost, which means you have to continue to take money out of your road work. And if you don't meet the minimum bare numbers with the state of Wisconsin, they will take away your road aids that they're giving you because you're not using them for road aids. We've got a whole lot of other issues boiling down to one thing. That's the levy limit freeze. Got nothing to do with how well St. Croix, and I'm convinced, Susie, that we would have raised the levies in all of our communities if we could have, because we wanted the service. But our hands are tied, and we need to do what's best for our communities. That's why we're elected to do that.
I want to go back to Suzanne's point. You are asking to opt out about the 148, not the 210,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Because
Because
you're
it's-
opting out in 3 months versus what theoretically is happening in 5 years.
Because you know
correct?
that. And so I'm saving $147,000 in 2019.
Yes.
If you don't let us out, we'll pay something, but I don't believe it's going to be $147,000. Because St. Croix EMS should be able to operate with a single ambulance. Hopefully you'll be able to operate with a full staffing instead of partial staffing, with 1 ambulance instead of 3.
What are you guys doing for first responders, may I ask?
When I talked to John, my concern with that was, and apparently it was the same discussions that must have been occurring within the discussions that the city was having. Brandon was going to run them, and I said, if Brandon's gone, then how in the world are you guys going to do it? They do all the hiring. Lakeview.
Okay.
They will do all the training. They will provide all of the, they will set up the protocols for dispatch. So the dispatching will occur out of St. Croix Dispatch 911 service for when, because there's protocols set up for when you need a first responder. So that dispatching would occur automatically with the first responders that Lakeview had hired for the town of Hudson. John said point blank, I don't lie to you, it's going to be rocky in the beginning. And the reason it's going to be rocky is because everybody that works for St. Croix EMS that's doing first responders is not going to provide first responder service for the town of Hudson. And I'm not naive.
It seems like a pretty broad statement.
But I would guess, Josh, that that would be pretty,
You think because you guys are opting out of our contract that we're going to tell you guys to take a hike and we're not going to respond to the people that live next to us?
the way things have been going lately, yes, I do, Josh.
You think that?
I do think that.
These are lives that we're talking about.
I know.
This is a service.
Yeah, I know.
I think the important thing here is to think about lives instead of money. And I attended the meeting last night, and
The only thing people were
Lakeview,
concerned about
but last
is
night
going for
at the
dinner.
town of Hudson, and they are not paying for training for first responders.
Today.
No,
They
in the
can't.
future, they are not.
No, they're not.
They will pay for training for continuing ed, that sort of thing, but it's going to be, they will get their training through
You gotta
WITC.
get everything together. They will pay a per capita, you will pay
Were you at the meeting last night?
no,
I was.
I had other commitments last night. So what, you won't have to pay for the training. Lakeview provides that.
That is not what they said.
Whoever they is, I don't know.
That's John Mueller.
It's not what John told me. So you gotta pay for it. So it will cost something under 147,000.
147,000?
That's
For
what we're
training
paying.
What?
That's
For
what
training
we're
first
paying
responders? What are
today.
you talking about?
For the St. Croix EMS service, it's in our budget for emergency services.
No, I think I feel safe in saying this, that if asked, Lakeview will do whatever it takes to make it work.
Right.
They will. It
So
was
we'll
never,
say
it was
great
never
enough.
Lakeview's intent to come in to offer a contract. I know that for a fact. Lakeview's intent was to listen, to find out what the needs were in the community, to partner like we always have been. Everybody wants this to work. That's not a question. It's a matter of what do we need to make it work? Who's interested in making changes like that? I know for a fact Lakeview will do whatever it takes. They're ready, willing, and able to do that. And Hudson Hospital, being part of Health Partners and partners, of course, with Lakeview, if we need an ambulance at Hudson Hospital, we'll do it. We'll make it work. And I guess to debate all the details at this point, I don't see the point.
I agree.
Well, and the only reason why I'm debating the details is, again, I'm just looking out for the town of Hudson's safety here and the residents within. If you're saying that it's going to be a rocky road and you're asking us to get rid of the contract within 3 months and you don't have everything in place, I think that is the reason that we're having this
Well,
conversation.
let me back up a little bit and help you
Okay.
through my thought pattern. When Ken Colby ran first responders in the town of Hudson, people hated Ken. We probably were lucky if we had 2 or 3 first responders going out every other month for several years while that happened. So did we have people die in the town of Hudson then? No. Did we not have first responders that would have helped us? Yes, we didn't. So will we have people die in the town of Hudson because we don't have first responders immediately? My answer to that is no. I do not believe that. So do I believe we're going to have first responders in the future? Yes, I do. Will we have to set up protocols? Yes, we will. Will we have to pay for first responders? Yes, we will. Do we pay for it today? No, we do not. So how are you going to pay for it? You're going to pay for it with the line item budget that you're paying today for emergency government, which has a levy limit freeze on it. You know what I mean? You can't go any higher than that. Based on, when actually back in 2004, that's when the levy limit went in, whatever we were paying for in 2004. And in 2004, Lakeview made the choice to not provide service to the town of Hudson because they wanted to continue to make St. Croix EMS a viable service in the community. Because we had looked at that in 2004. And John Mueller came and made a presentation after St. Croix EMS in 2004 and said, we're not interested in taking over the emergency services for the town of Hudson. So that all died back in 2004, and the levy limits had just started then. Okay, so there's a lot of history here of how this has all happened and progressed forward, and all of that has nothing to do with the lives of the people, the lives of the service. It doesn't. It's got all to do with the levy limits.
I'll just say this too. Like I said, I'm not promoting Lakeview. I'm not representing Lakeview. But I can vouch for their integrity and their follow-through. This is what they do. And it's not that St. Croix EMS can't do it, perhaps if the staffing levels were different, but Lakeview has said, as Hudson Hospital as well, that we're here to help. We've said that since the beginning. We're not pushing our agenda on anyone. We're not pushing the services on anyone. It's no sales pitch. Didn't even come to that meeting, is what I understand, with any type of contract in mind. It was to listen to what the needs are. So Lakeview EMS, if asked, and it sounds like they have been asked,
They've been asked.
They are in a position, I know that they can pull the trigger on that. They can make it happen. That's what they do. And so I don't want anybody to be concerned about them being given the, like you said, the catch-22, you got to give notice now in order to give the 90 days. But if you need the services by the end of the year, I just know with 100% confidence Lakeview can deliver on what the needs are by the end of the year. It might be a little rocky because of the short period of time, because they still have to ramp up too, but they can do it.
I need to help you with that. Mid-March, Jeff Johnson called me, wanted me to come down to the shop, said, just so you know, I've been requested to look at having Lakeview provide the service to the town of Hudson, and so I'm calling Lakeview and having discussions with John Mueller. So Jeff Johnson called John to request providing services to the town of Hudson. It wasn't John Mueller calling Jeff Johnson. It was Jeff Johnson calling him.
So you've known this since mid-March, and this is the first we're hearing in the EMS Commission?
I never heard another word from him. As all of those discussions, that. Yeah, I did.
I understand
and
that.
He said not to say anything, so I didn't.
Did you know at the last EMS Commission that you were looking to leave?
Yes. Was it on the agenda? No.
Well, you control the agenda, right? I mean,
but I knew the discussions the day before our meeting. No, I didn't know. I didn't know.
So you didn't know?
I didn't know at our last meeting yet. I knew there were discussions, but I didn't know if there were any discussions to move forward yet.
Okay.
Who requested Jeff Johnson to look into Lakeview?
Don't know.
Back in March?
Don't know. Or at least if I do know, I'm not going to share that.
So you might know.
I might know.
I got a question about first responders, the way it operates now. Josh Olson came to our meeting and explained what happens is a chase vehicle is sent out with a paramedic first, and then the EMT brings the ambulance. Now that seems to me to be more efficient than calling someone out of their home in their vehicle to come, a first responder to come from their home or go to a chase vehicle.
And that's why originally when the city was looking at doing it, they never were going to provide first responder service. They were going to leave the other partners without a first responder program. So I kept telling Tom McCormick, who was the representative for the city at the time, you need to provide first responder service to the other municipalities, because that chase vehicle isn't necessarily going all the way out into the town of and the other partners municipalities to provide that service, especially if it's multiple vehicles out. And therefore, they were working with Lakeview on it, but they never got to a final solution on it. At least that's, Tom never said it was resolved. He just kept telling us they were working on it.
Okay, I'm just asking, what is the situation right now? Is a chase vehicle with a paramedic sent out first?
Is it? On all calls? No.
On all calls.
On all calls?
If it's...
On every call, there's a paramedic that's going in a chase vehicle.
I don't think that Lakeview was proposing that,
No, they're not.
and they're not going to do that, so it'll be a delay.
And it determines your protocols, and that's true. So if that's what your determination is, that you want to pay for a first responder program at the rate that you're paying for your emergency services.
No, we're paying for a faster response of EMS. That's what we're paying for.
No, you're paying
because we're
for
getting a paramedic there sooner.
But you're paying for a first responder program then.
Not really. We would be paying for a paramedic either way.
Because that's your discussion at this point.
What?
That's your discussion at this point?
I'm
is
just making
that's-
this point.
If that's your first responder program?
I wanted to know what our first responder program is right now. It sounds better than what we would get.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
I
that's
will
my
agree with
point.
you. I will agree with you.
That's my point.
What I would recommend is, we come from different parts of different businesses and that kind of thing. I think we could be going around and around on this for days.
We could.
If the decisions have already been made to opt out, I think it does merit bringing people in who do EMS. That's their training, that's their experience. They could answer any questions. For us to try to do that, I think we're just going to spin out of control here.
I agree.
so
Doesn't make any sense.
If at any point we feel it's important to do that, we can invite people, St. Croix EMS, we can invite people from Lakeview EMS, whoever, to come in and answer any of those type of questions. Sure.
With these questions, would the town be entertained at all staying on for 2019 and disbanding in 2020?
I can't answer that. I don't get two things. I can only speak
For yourself.
for myself.
Understood.
And the other thing is I haven't been part of any of the discussions that have occurred in the last month, including their last board meeting. I wasn't at, because I was on a plane heading to Iceland at that time.
Well, I'd like to add to that. If the per capita were kept at $17, would you extend one more year?
I don't know. I can't answer that.
Okay.
Because that's just Tim Foster.
Would you take it to the board is, I guess, the question.
Yes.
Would you take it to your board as an option?
No, and here's the reason for it. We've never had any discussions about moving forward with any plan, and as I look at the medical director's report, we continually have staffing issues,
It's because I've lost 2 full-time paramedics in the last month.
and nothing's new, Josh. That's been going on for 3 years. You know what I mean? It's not new. We're not facing reality of what we can't get for staffing levels. And why did we have to get rid of Brandon? Why was that?
I'd be curious
Resigned?
to know that.
Why did he resign? Because the current staffing level of the employees of St. Croix EMS were refusing to take shifts. So Brandon ended up working 6,000 hours last year, 4,000 the year before, and they thought he was taking extra shifts to make money. No, it was because we weren't filling the staffing levels. And we got a person that left because of that, because you either had to request, and Brandon just said, I'm done. I'm working all these hours, and you're going to have an independent review to see if I'm cheating the service to do that. And he says, I'm done. So the one person that you had was a full-time paramedic, so you lost 2, you lost 3. You know what I mean? Because you basically made the chief resign. He could either resign, or he could take and have a review of everything he was doing. Was he running a perfect service? No. I will give you that. Because I had met with Brandon, it's probably 8 weeks ago now, because Paul Rohde had been concerned about, because of some of the stuff within the staff, about what Brandon wasn't doing. So Brandon and I sat down. He gave me a list of 5 things he was going to do within the next month, including having an employee meeting and everything else. None of those things happened in the next 4 weeks before he resigned.
So
it was-
we're on contract discussion, though, not.
You know what I mean? So
This is a little bit off topic though, right? Because, I mean, the contract, your decision to move forward with Lakeview happened before all that stuff went down, correct?
Right,
So
right.
this is a little
And
bit
it's
off
just
topic.
it's just gotten worse, not better. And so when she's saying, do you want to stay on? And the answer is no. I don't believe I'd take that to the town of Hudson to stay on, because our staffing issues have gotten worse, not better.
Do you think, Tim, that it was a mistake that the city of Hudson did not contract with Lakeview last year? Do you think it was a mistake?
Yes, I do.
How about you, Stan? Do you think it was a mistake?
I think the mistake was when we offered a different payment plan, that the city didn't want anything to do with it, and so, yeah, we were ready to opt out then. I mean, we just missed the deadline last year.
Do you understand what he said?
Not the contract, meaning?
Yeah, I didn't think you did. When it became clear to me well over a year ago that the partners were not going to have any decision-making ability in the decision whether we're hiring Lakeview or not. It was strictly the city council. And that's exactly what happened. So the partners decide that's fine, we can live with it. Because Stan had already had his accountant sit down and make up a presentation that was shown to the council. And the ad hoc committee members went to the council and said, we believe we're, and this is a quote, we're paying our fair share. And what his entire presentation said was, you can't get 70% of the service and pay for 50% of the cost and call that fair. I believe, don't tell me if I'm wrong, if you'd have done that adjustment, we wouldn't be where we are today.
I believe that's true.
So it had all to do with the council deciding that they didn't need to pay their fair share. And the ad hoc committee not going toward cost reduction to move toward keeping that per capita cost down. So there was just this whole thing has a whole lot of stuff happening around it. It isn't just one decision or another moving forward.
So you couldn't have that conversation with us again. You are leaving for Lakeview, is basically what.
We're having to make an option, yeah.
Yeah.
Because not only
because
does
of last
it
year's
comes
decision.
up, it becomes less cost. And they will provide, as far as I'm concerned, as far as the emergency government services to the community are going to be just as good as St. Croix EMS, and the only thing that will be a hair less is first responders. I'll give you that, and I know that.
So the 50, and I wasn't around for the 50-50 discussion of what happened in the previous year. So you're saying that the contribution that the city of Hudson makes is not 50%?
No, it is.
Okay.
But they get 70% of the calls. So all
Okay.
that his presentation said was, with the fire contract, we have a split agreement. 50% is for assessed value and 50% is based on call volume. We said we'd like to see you do the same thing with St. Croix EMS. Do 50% on call volume and 50% on per capita. So that if we're not getting that per capita charge, then share the cost with us and take care of what's your half of it, cover at least your share of the cost. And the council said, no, we're paying our fair share. You guys suck it up. And to your help, Ray sat here and said, do you realize that we're paying $1,000 for each call? Based on, if you take what the town of Troy pays for a call and you take the total number of calls and you divide it by that cost, it's $1,000 per call that the town of Troy pays. Besides the customer, the patient receives a bill of probably about $1,000 for that same service. So we're paying $2,000 for that service, which to the town of Troy doesn't appear to be fair. They were actually getting the worst.
I just wanted to clarify that, yes, we did have that proposal in front of us, but I had looked at the expenditures that were in the St. Croix EMS budget at that time, and we realized that we had some finance administration salaries that we were not putting 100% into the fund. For example, our accountant who does our accounts payable, when we look at number of transactions that she did for St. Croix EMS, her percentages weren't as high as they should be. So in fact, those expenses weren't hitting St. Croix EMS. Also, the rent payment for the downstairs was at the same amount that they were renting the two offices upstairs years ago. And so that rent payment hadn't gone up. So those costs weren't hitting St. Croix EMS. And then the last thing is the transfers. So the transfers that happened in the city of Hudson, that revenue was being allocated to all the partners.
I don't believe that's true.
It is.
Well, the revenue is, but the number of calls wasn't anything to do with it. So what you're saying, bottom line,
is
the
that
cost should have been higher, not lower.
The cost to allocate
The cost to the St. Croix EMS should
have
be
been
higher, correct?
Correct. And so
And
it-
therefore, the cost to the partners should be higher, not less.
Correct, but then when if we did the 50/50 funding with those higher costs, what we were paying per capita and what you were paying per capita, the partners,
So you just
was about
decided
a
that it was
wash.
probably about a wash.
It was about a wash.
Well, we didn't take it that way.
Okay,
Sorry.
that's okay. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
So again, just to echo what she said, so the 50/70 that you were talking about is not actual at the end of the day.
So bottom line, we shouldn't be able to do it for $17. Right? Should go to 19, and it was supposed to go to 18. Or was it 19? Do you remember, Stan? 19.
And they dropped
We
it there.
decided because the city's going to sell it, we'll suck it up and take it out of the cash flow. Because we're just going to get that money back anyway. And we were convinced the city was going to sell it to Lakeview at that time, and therefore just take the cash and we won't have as large a cash reserve at the end of the year. And it turned out we still had as much cash reserve at the end of the year because we couldn't staff the number of people necessary to fill it.
So in light of what Brenda said, do you still stand by your statement that that the city of Hudson is not paying its fair share for St. Croix EMS?
Yeah.
Really?
Because, Bill, if you raise the cost of St. Croix EMS and then you do the per run capita, the cost went up and it's still, she's right to the extent that the dollar amount to go into the town of Hudson would be the same. But the city would end up having to pay more in their theoretic return to run St. Croix EMS. That looks in the eyes of the partners like you're sharing in the cost. And you chose not to do that. And it didn't look any other way to the partners than that. And that's the way it was taken by the partners. I think everything started moving forward with the discussions with Lakeview after that discussion. And even within, and I was fully defending everything for St. Croix EMS up to that point.
Up to the March timeframe?
No, up to the point when the city decided they didn't need to pay their fair share. At that point, it was like, come on, you're being hypocritical.
And so this is the first conversation in an EMS commission meeting?
No. We talked to Joyce about that here when she came.
You talked about going to Lakeview?
No.
That's what I'm talking about.
Not
This is
sharing
the first time that you're talking about going to Lakeview in an EMS commission meeting, even though you felt that way last year.
No, I hadn't. You couldn't even go, Bill. So when you're doing those discussions, you don't do that in public because you're not knowing whether the total board is behind it. The total town board didn't discuss whether we were even ready to discuss this until our August town board meeting. And then at that point, Jeff brought it forward. I talked to John Mueller, and he said, what do you guys think? And the rest of the board said, move forward, see if you can get a contract for 2019, January 1st. That's the first time the town of Hudson had made a decision to move forward with discussions with Lakeview to have a contract for January 1st of 2019. August. That's just to start the discussions to move forward to say, yes, we'd like to. So is that something I should be talking about at a St. Croix EMS commission meeting? No, absolutely not. No more than you would talk about discussions that the council's having.
Bill asked a question earlier. We didn't really answer it. How do we foresee this changing the relationships? And I would propose it's not how do we see it changing it. It's just really a call to action where we can't let it change our relationships. We're all here for the same reason. Right. We all want to make sure we can provide quick service for the communities. For Hudson Hospital, again, for Lakeview, I think we've always said we're here to help. We want to make this work. We've publicly stated we want St. Croix EMS to work, but the staffing models, the sustainability, it's been an ongoing concern. And whatever decisions are made by the townships and the village and the city, we have to work together. And I don't want to sound Pollyannish here, but if we don't, this is going to go in a bad direction. We've got to make sure that we can understand our differences, air them out, listen to each other. And as I'm not here to preach to this commission, I'm just stating my opinion. We've got to work together. So I don't see it being an option not to make it work in terms of our relationships.
And when I called you over a month ago and asked to have a meeting with you and everybody involved with transfers and stuff, and I still haven't got a reply.
Well, I'd beg
Or
to
a date
differ
for
on
a
that,
meeting?
Josh. No, I beg to differ, because the people I spoke to said that they were waiting on you. I asked them to schedule a meeting.
I haven't heard from anybody to schedule a meeting.
Okay, well then, don't
Zero.
misinterpret anything there, because it was not,
No, I haven't heard from anybody, so. The day I talked to you was the last time I've heard anything about a
always
meeting.
willing and able to talk to anyone about anything. And after you and I had spoken, I said, yes, let's get something on the agenda.
Yep, and I was supposed to hear from your secretary, and I haven't heard from her yet, so.
Good.
And I want to, this is just my observation. In all of the discussions as we moved forward originally, the city, to potentially sell the service to Lakeview, the discussions that were refuted at that time was, this is a community service. St. Croix EMS is a community service for our community. And I agree, it is, for the city of Hudson. That same level of community service isn't as important to the partner areas, maybe a little bit for the village, because they'll do things up at the school. But otherwise, we don't have the same community needs. The runs going on and the football game and all of that stuff, that's a city of Hudson thing. And all of the discussions now with this, at this point, are jobs and people, and that's true. So do I think that St. Croix EMS should be abolished and go to, even for the city? I don't think so, Bill, because I believe it is a service for the city of Hudson. Can you handle it with one ambulance? Yes. Is it a community service then? Yes, it is. Will you be paying your fair share? Yes, you will. And that's just my personal observation of the way it may go down. And I might be 100% wrong, but that's just my observation.
My perception is, look, at the end of the day, for Lakeview to cover town of Hudson, I would assume from a financial standpoint and from a placement standpoint that Lakeview would have to take over transfers. Taking over transfers, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, is a big hit on St. Croix EMS.
Huge. It is. It is.
And so that falls into question whether St. Croix EMS could survive. So in a way, the decision that you're making could potentially
And that's true.
be the start of the demise.
And you might be right.
And you're okay with that.
At the end of the day, because of what it's doing, it's reducing our costs that I can't borrow for the town. I'm elected to make sure that I'm doing the best thing for my constituents in my municipality. It's got nothing to do with St. Croix EMS. It's got to do with what I'm elected to do. And I'm elected to provide services for our community based on our per capita, based on what I can budget, and I can't budget increases that continue to move forward on per capita cost. I can't borrow for operating cost. That state statute says that. You can't do that.
But you could have a referendum.
We've done that. It was just like shooting clay pigeons.
I've attended a couple of your meetings, and most everyone there said they would.
The people that are there, yes.
Well, there were different people there last night.
When we request, yeah, well, who's there last night? The people that are there are because of the people that are concerned about the fact that you're not going to provide a service. Don't get wrong. When you have a public hearing, You're, as an elected official, what you have to do is make sure that you carefully listen to whatever is being presented there by the people that are concerned about the issue. And at the end of the day, when you're determining what you're going to vote on, it's based on what is good for the overall community, based on your decision of your vote, not based on how this group of people that are here are. They may have a very good argument, but if it's not the best thing for your community, that's not the way your vote should go.
Well, the consensus of opinion seemed to be they didn't mind paying extra to save
I
lives.
told you, and everybody that says they turned down the board's referendum for roads said they would have been willing to pay for it. But at the end of the day, when the referendum went through for roads, it failed. So how did we handle that? We borrowed $800,000 instead of raising the levy $400,000, which is what the referendum. Every 2 years we borrow $800,000. We pay $5,000 in fees and $20,000 in interest. So it costs an extra $25,000 every 2 years to borrow the money that the township residents wouldn't give us the money in a referendum. Does that make any sense? Absolutely not. But that's what happened. And Jeff Johnson said we should go with another referendum. But you got to pay for the referendum. Is it worth it? The answer was no.
Opinion last night seemed to be that lives were more important than gravel on the road.
You're telling me people are going to die? Are you sure about that?
You know, the thing is, they were more concerned, they were willing to pay the extra to have an EMS service locally. And
I told you, I don't believe there's a soul in this room that if your levy limits weren't frozen, wouldn't have agreed to raise your levy. And even Stan agreed. It's got nothing to do with whether you want to do it or not. It's got to do with whether you can or not. And levies don't pass easy. This is your first term in office.
Let your population decide that with a referendum rather than making the decision yourself.
You're elected to make a decision. And the decision...
You have to listen to the people, too.
But the decision was the board. And so they can vote you out for not doing that.
You know, if it's more important to get reelected than save lives, well, what can I say?
Yeah,
Okay,
I agree with you. We need...
Let's get back
I agree
onto,
with
because you again will not take anything back to the town of Hudson. You want to get out of the contract within 3 months, and that sounds like the way the town of Hudson is going.
personally.
Correct.
I will present it to him today when we talk, and I will let you know if it's different than that. Well, you'll know, because we haven't sent our letter yet.
Right.
You'll know what the town board's decision was by Friday.
Well, you're having a vote today at 1 p.m.
We're voting today at 1 o'clock.
and a letter comes to
We'll go
us
this
by
week before
Friday.
Friday. So you'll know.
Yep. So is there any possible action on this part, or this was just discussion, right?
This was just discussion. I didn't even notice that on the agenda because I was concerned. I thought we ought to have this discussion, but we couldn't do it without it being on the agenda.
I think just one other point of discussion, it could even be for a future agenda. We had talked about the transfers and everything is so dependent on how it's dispatched, right? So I don't think any of us really truly understand, at least I don't, what is the call tree? Who decides who to call, when, under what circumstances? And the reason I bring that up is I'm hearing all sorts of things about Lower St. Croix being dispatched or backing up St. Croix EMS, and then you got River Falls, and you got New Richmond, we got ambulances all over the place. And I don't think anybody understands, since everything is so dependent on where the calls come from, I don't think anybody understands who's making those decisions, where are they going, are they following any certain protocols in terms of who do they call first, who do they call for backup?
Well,
it's a mess.
And I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's where I brought up that point of, I thought there was a contract or some agreement set in place that St. Croix EMS gets called first on transfers, then Lakeview. In fact, that's what John
That's a
Mueller told me.
protocol.
But what I'm hearing is
Protocol, not contractual.
Correct.
what I'm
Gotcha.
hearing is that's not being followed. At least that's the perception it's not being followed.
Josh, do you have
And
a
so-
response to that?
The calls come from the hospital, whoever the clerk is in the ER at that time. They have the list that's given by, that was made up by regions, the docs, the medical docs. So it's Hudson, Lakeview, and I'm not sure after that how it flows after Lakeview, but it's responsibility of the hospital to call for the transfer. If the hospital calls us and we say that we cannot take the transfer, it's their job to jump to the next one on the list.
So
after we get the call, I have no clue what the process is. We don't call anybody else.
Is that through St. Croix Dispatch at all?
Nope, that
This
does not
is
go through
strictly with the
dispatch.
hospital.
I'm hearing like through Washington County and some other.
Nope.
So
I'm
they-
hearing all
so-
these miscellaneous examples, and it's confusing because
I think
I don't
you're-
have
I
confidence
think
personally that we're following all the protocols.
who's not
I
following
think you are.
protocols?
So
Then that would be a
the
hospital.
Well, no,
Regions
not what I'm
determines the
reading.
protocol? Is that what I heard you say?
Regions docs, our medical directors
Protocol of
have
who
the ones
Hudson
that,
Hospital is to call.
they're the ones that drew up the protocol on services for transfers to call. So it's us, Lakeview, then I'm not sure how it goes after that.
Well, I'll just lay it on the cards on the table. What I'm hearing through some folks at Lakeview who are just sharing more just their perception is they hear things that Lower St. Croix is covering St. Croix EMS. Then you got New Richmond here, you got River Falls here, you got ambulances, and these patients are not being, Lakeview's not being called, is what I'm hearing. And it's not through the hospital.
Right, well, then you're considered, then you're thinking not transfers, you're thinking 911 calls. And best practice for 911 calls is if we can't take the call and we need to call mutual aid, then you call the next closest
Who's
ambulance
making all these
service.
decisions and who's in a better position to respond? All I'm saying is for future agenda, I think I'd like to understand, and other people would like to understand, who's making the decisions on who to call who and under what circumstances, and what they're hearing is certain people think that they're backing up other EMS services, and I'm not so sure that's clearly understood in terms of what those protocols are, and or are we following the protocols?
What protocol?
That's all I'm suggesting.
What protocol, though?
Pardon me?
What protocol are we not following?
The protocols in terms of who's getting called first, who's backing up who, and those types
There
of
is no protocol on who gets called first for 911 calls. If it's in our service area, we get called. If
And for the
we're
transfers?
transfers, that's got nothing to do. We do not call. It is not St. Croix EMS's responsibility. If we cannot take the transfer, then the hospital goes, okay, we'll call somebody else. What happens with that? That's a hospital issue, not a service issue in St. Croix County. I don't take the call and say, okay, I'll get you a truck, I'll figure out where it's coming from. And I call all the other 4 other services and say, hey, can you guys do a transfer at Hudson? That's left at the ER clerks.
Josh, I get that, but I think if we were to invite other people here, I think it would turn into the same kind of level of discussion that we just had. Differences of opinion, people feel that there are things that aren't being followed, that there are certain alliances and things going on between different EMS services and all that.
I have no clue.
I don't want to get into the detail here, but for your future agenda topic, and I mentioned this before, I think it'd be helpful to outline, since all the transfers and the 911 calls are dependent on who's calling them and deciding who to call, it would be helpful to know what those protocols are.
I guess I need clarification because I don't understand what you mean by protocols for transfers and 911s.
I think that, if I understood you right, Regions determines what the protocol should be. The Regions doctors, they give that to the hospital.
Correct.
The hospital makes the phone call to 911 or to St. Croix
No,
EMS?
the hospital makes the phone calls to the individual medics that are working for whichever service they call.
So they'll call you and say, can you do a transfer?
Correct. They will call our on-duty medic if they have a transfer. If we cannot do it, then
You just let Hudson Hospital know.
that we cannot do it. Yep.
And they make a determination on who to call?
And then they call the next person on the list. So they'll call over to Alina
Who
to
don't have
talk
anything to do
to.
with that?
Okay.
That's-
I'm getting feedback from all sorts of folks that there's all sorts of weird things going on out there
Nothing
in
weird.
terms of who's getting called and who's backing up who and those type of things. And I just didn't have any sense of confidence that if there are protocols, what are they? Who's deciding? Are we following them? If you're telling me it's a non-issue, I can respond. back.
Transfers is a non-issue because that's out of our hands. That's all dealt with the hospital at that time. And a lot of it's by the docs that are
I don't
working
want
up
to
there.
derail us with that, but I felt I wanted to bring it.
And 911, there's a St. Croix County map that says This is the coverage area for St. Croix EMS, and the first service to receive a call for 911 is St. Croix EMS in that location on the map. If they can't get a truck out, do you notify the dispatcher that you can't get a truck out and he calls for backup, or how does that handle?
We request for mutual aid for the
And
closest.
So does the dispatcher
ambulance.
make that call?
Correct.
Okay.
And the determination is the closest ambulance or a specific service?
Closest ambulance. So if it's way out in the corner of Hudson Township, we look and see which, if it's closer for Richmond or if it's going to be closer for Lakeview.
Well, with my limited knowledge, basically what I'm hearing is Lakeview is saying, hey, we never get any requests, we never hear from anybody.
And
We're not getting the requests for transfers. They're going to other people and other things.
For transfers or for 911 calls?
Transfers.
911.
I got a piece of paper, I probably have it right here, that says Lakeview took 30% of the transfers out of Hudson Hospital so far this year. So they can't say that they're not getting the calls.
But I think, again, all the more reason, whether it's this topic or anything else we're talking about in terms of all the things that we talked about, there may be some value in bringing people who work in these areas who really understand it, who can answer any questions. Otherwise, we're just going to go round and round and round.
So you want us to bring our competitor in here to have discussions and...
Well, in the spirit of what we're talking about in relationships, I don't view it as a competition. I view it as we're all working together on this to make sure we can provide the best service for
You don't think it's a competition?
I don't view it that way, no. We've always said we're here to help. You're here to help. We're here to help. We're all here to help. We're here to serve the community.
Absolutely. And I've done it for 21 years.
If we view it as a competition, that gets us exactly where we are today with the conversations we're having.
Right.
Because we're viewing it as competition. And by viewing it as competition, we're going to be having differences.
So if all these concerns were so big about transfers and 911 calls and stuff, my phone's never rang from Lakeview.
We're trying to understand, like I just said, we're trying to understand
I'm just saying,
how is it set up?
I'm just saying, John, trust me, John knows how it's set up. So I don't truly believe that it's John trying to figure out how it's set up. John's been in this business a very long time. John's a very smart man. I'm friends with John. I'm friends with Matt Milder. I have been for a long time. Matt Milder got his start in EMS here and moved on, obviously, to where he's at today.
But what I can tell you is Lakeview, for example, does not view itself as a competitor for anyone here in the community. Lakeview has said that they're here to help, and they've been waiting to be asked to be helped because they can see what's happening. Okay? And if they're, well, I'll leave it at that.
All I'm saying, if it's that big of a concern for Lakeview, my phone has never rang as far as how stuff's going over here. That's the statement I have.
Okay.
That's all I got.
We should move on.
I agree. If you have some other concerns.
I think the concern that Josh talks about when Josh brings up competitive is exactly to the point that I made with Tim, is that when Town of Hudson contracts with Lakeview, Lakeview starts taking transfers, we're going down a road where I don't know if St. Croix EMS is going to be sustainable. So that, in particular, is why I think Josh said competitive.
That's fair. I respect that.
And do I think Lakeview's going to be able to do 100% of the transfers? My gut feel, no. I don't believe they will be able to. With dynamic deployment and the number of transfers we're doing for St. Croix EMS, I got to believe that just like St. Croix EMS isn't able to do 100% of the transfers, and I thought we were closer to that than 70%, I would guess that's true in the future too. Because if we only got one ambulance, it's going to be tough to even do transfers. St. Croix EMS.
Can't by state law.
Can't you?
Not with one
You'd have to have a
ambulance.
backup ambulance, and so the protocols would have to be such that if they can't get a service there immediately, are they willing to wait to transfer the patient till they get there? And today, the answer to that has been no. So those discussions all got to occur. That's a different issue. Okay, I agree. We need to move on. We may need to talk about a date to discuss the direction in another agenda item for moving forward in 2019 with the service and the community partners and Lakeview And maybe that's all we discuss, but we're going to need to have that meeting at such time as we have more information than we have today, both by the partners and the council, on what you want to do. You know what I mean?
You mean whether, you're suggesting whether you guys have two contracts, one with St. Croix EMS,
Right,
whether we're letting,
Right,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so, rather than just waiting for and so,
This is a vote that you're having today. We're receiving a letter on Friday.
right,
Council will need to make a decision.
right.
Yeah,
right. We need to
absolutely.
meet sometime
But
after
yeah,
that, to
it
have
would,
those discussions.
it would be nice sooner
Yes.
rather than later.
Right. Number 8, update on ambulance remount.
Should be done sometime next week. I went over there and looked at it last week, and they're just waiting on a few parts, so we should have it sometime next week.
Okay. The loaner will go back then?
Yes.
Okay. Number 9, discussion possible action on the 2019 budget, including the possible action for staffing. How are you budgeting that, Brenda? I didn't know how you were going to do that even.
We're waiting for Friday till we get all the letters so that we know how we can move forward for 2019 on the budget. And that's really where we're at.
Okay.
I don't know what kind of update you want. As for staffing, maybe Josh can talk about that, but it's really contingent
That
on.
will all depend on what happens with the partners, won't
Correct.
it?
Yeah, it's got a big weigh on everything.
But also, what are we going to do? Let's say the partners don't opt out. It seems to me like when I look at the medical director's concerns, it's the same concerns that we've had as a commission for the last 3 years, that we aren't able to staff what we're supposed to be staffing. And yet we hire and we lose them, we hire them and we lose them, and the only reason our budget has continued to be in the semi-black is because we ain't staffing to the level we need to be.
No, but we're handling our calls. It's a constant battle. I mean, I don't know.
We need to find a solution to that other than
Josh,
we're working our crews.
sorry to interrupt. Josh, can you correct me if I'm wrong here? But if I remember correctly, when Joe was named interim director, there was, I don't know if you would call it an influx, but there was more people coming forward to staff. Is that correct?
Correct.
And what have you been seeing since?
The same. There's a lot of people that weren't working that are now working. We've had a bunch of applications come in. We've hired this is all part of my report, but we did
So do you
offer.
think that if we all stayed, we won't have any staffing issues?
I would love to say that, but I can't guarantee that.
Have you
Okay.
hired any medics since,
Yeah, so we gave offered a position to a full-time medic last week, and I think he's starting 27th.
So we're still
Thursday
too
or
short,
Friday. One short, well, too short on paper.
because you need a director, or chief, right?
Correct, well, yeah,
So you're chief and one paramedic, right?
2 paramedics and a chief.
And a chief, 2 paramedics and a chief? Oof.
How do we,
That's with the
I
replacement
thought we
that you
have
just hired,
3
Josh?
paramedics right now, and we hired the 4th.
Right, but we have 5 on the budget.
That's right, 5, yep.
so we're short one
Short 1 and a chief.
and a chief?
So it's really one full-time paramedic short and a chief that's a paramedic, correct?
With the applications that you're getting, does it appear to you that you'll find another medic soon?
I think so, yeah. Just a matter of time.
How long do you think that might take?
I don't know.
A month?
No, it takes, from everything I've seen in the past, what, 2.5 by the time you...
By the time you find someone, hire them, get them trained in, so they're off on the street by themselves to actually, make the schedule worth it. You're probably looking good 2.5. At the very extreme longest, 3 months.
And then on top of it, after we all get to that point, somebody else will leave, and it's like, we're right back to where we were before.
Yeah, but you get that in any job. you'll get that, that's the way public safety is. I mean, obviously, it's the way St. Croix EMS has been for years. People come here to get the experience so they can get to the bigger, busier services over in the cities. It's the exact same thing. I'm sure it's the exact same way with hospitals. They get into a position at a hospital to get the experience so they can move over to a bigger hospital or move into a different department. I mean, people move around all the time. I'm sure Lakeview has people that have left Lakeview to go to bigger other services, or it's nothing new to us. I mean, it's not a unique problem to us.
I agree with you. And I'll reiterate something I've heard. And it's the parents of one of our full-time paramedics have tried to encourage this individual to move on to a different career because $38,000 a year is not a career job. You can't pay for a house and do everything for $38,000 a year. And that's what we're paying. So, and that's an issue. And that's why everybody's having that issue, and that's why they move on, because you can't make a career out of a $38,000 a year job. No more than you can run a cash register at Walmart and think you can make house payments and get ahead. Same issue. Sorry, it just is.
I think that, I mean, there are differences in terms of the rate at which people are leaving. I mean, you mentioned the hospital. They're not leaving at that rate, and then there's economies of scale with more staff and all that. You're in a much better position to absorb.
It's just an example.
I understand, but I don't think it's a fair comparison,
Okay.
personally.
But the uncertainty seems to accelerate the turnover here. Am I right?
Yeah. All the turmoil here doesn't help by any means. All the stuff, between Brandon, Joe, and, town of Hudson, North Hudson, town of Troy, all their votes. I mean, it all plays a part.
Do you think that has a direct impact on staffing at this point?
Absolutely, 100%.
And it's always been true, Bill. Whether it was Eric, it was Kim. You know what I mean? And those issues.
What I'm asking is there going to be fallout to our staffing because of the decisions that are being made today?
Yes.
That's what I'm asking.
Yes, there will be. And there always have been.
Well,
there not always has been a conversation about you leaving for Lakeview, I guess is my whole point.
But staffing issues have always had fallout.
Staffing issues.
Based on.
What I'm asking for is a huge
made.
fallout by employees because they don't see the support by our partners. That's what I'm asking.
I don't think you're going to see a fallout of staffing issues.
It doesn't
Just
help.
because the partners are leaving.
It doesn't help for hiring. I mean that's the biggest reason that we can't get applications in here, I think, right now. I mean, everything's plastered in the news, and everybody's just kind of sitting back with their heels up waiting to see what happens.
Did they say anything in the interview process like that?
Absolutely. I hired an EMT last week that's concerned. But he wants the experience of a busier service, so he's got to do what he's got to do. But is he concerned about losing his job? Absolutely, 100%. And he asked me, what's the likelihood of that happening? Well, I don't know. Can't answer that for you right now.
Okay. Fair. Anything further on staffing? Thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you, Josh. Medical director's update. I don't know how to take that. I read it. I hear what he's saying. It's concerning. Do you have any, since I suppose, Josh, you're the closest, what's your thoughts on what he's saying there?
I don't know.
The sleep deprivation and running the crew ragged. And we always had that concern even with Brandon.
Yeah.
And because we can't staff to the level we need to be. And it's concerning to me when our medical director says this and is willing to put it down in paper. That's concerning to me. And we hadn't heard anything from Aaron for months. And all of a sudden we see this.
I mean, it's a concern, yeah. But I don't know, I haven't had any concern raised in the last month as far as, granted, I have 2 medics that are working a ton, but they're not doing it. They're only doing as much as they can. They won't do any more than that.
Who talks with Aaron?
I do.
Before our next meeting, can you and Aaron talk and see if his concerns are being met, or if we still have the issue, just to understand, so in the future we aren't left with this is still the condition. You know what I mean? Because it's not the training, it's not any of that, it's just staffing levels. Okay.
As this is my second EMS commission meeting, is he usually in attendance at this
No.
meeting? No. Got it. Thank you.
And at one point, Bill, my goodness, we had a medical director that we hadn't heard from for 3 years. And so when we finally found Aaron, young doctor, good man, he came to a couple meetings. I agree he is. He's doing a good job for the service. He really
I
is.
didn't know if he was in this.
Yeah.
I mean, it
So
would be nice
He
to
can
invite
be
him.
available if you guys want him here.
Yeah, he'd come.
I would
He
love
would
to
come.
invite him for
He would
this
come.
next meeting.
He would come. Maybe that's a good idea. We'll do that. Thank you.
As I was reading the first line, though, I mean, it just grabbed me. Staffing shortages, and I get that we lost 2 full-time paramedics, but obviously this all happened before you made your announcement,
Right.
and the rest of it. So, I just don't know what that turning point or tipping point is going to be. How do we get better staffing in St. Croix EMS? Because this is all happening even regardless of what we're talking about with. Now, granted, if townships or the village are going to opt out, that will have an impact on the psyche of people who are interviewing or applying or current staff, and they might feel a little more anxious about, what the future may be. But that, to me, is kind of independent of this, because we've been having these issues for as long as I've been around. Right. And I don't know what we're doing different in order to capture more recruits, to keep them to stay. I mean, the retention rates, all that kind of stuff. What are we doing different?
I think the biggest impact on it is that, nobody wants to do this job anymore. Nobody wants to do.
But it was that way a while ago, too.
Yeah, it's nothing.
Right. Well, the tech colleges aren't running classes and stuff. But, I mean, it's hard for us because the cities is so close, and the pay, there is a greater pay difference. I mean, I'm sure that's
Is
one
pay,
of the.
you think, the biggest thing?
It's one of the top 5 biggest things. I mean, why would you stop here
Right.
for $19 an hour for a paramedic, as an example, or you can go to the cities and make $6 to $8 more an hour, and it's a 10-minute drive to get into the cities.
And yet, as I listen to the discussions of the ad hoc committee that has the council's ear more than the commission, they went to Baldwin and felt that Baldwin's doing better with lower pay. That tells me that the ad hoc committee is going to recommend to the council to reduce the pay of our paramedics.
think
And
what
you know
they
what I
found
mean?
out-
My concern is that if we move that direction, we'll even have more problems. You know what I mean?
understand.
That's just my observation.
Sure. I think what you'll find with the Baldwin findings is that they're saying that you don't have to pay necessarily metro rates, not saying that it's lower pay than what we're giving now. Correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, that's,
I don't know.
They're paying less than we are.
I haven't been part of any of the Baldwin discussions, so.
but that's my understanding of the findings, was that we don't have to step up to the pay of metro.
No, and I don't believe we'll ever get there, Bill.
I don't think their suggestion is lowering pay. I haven't heard that in the ad hoc findings.
Okay. Anything else on the medical director? Otherwise, operations supervisors report.
Like I said, we offered a position for full-time paramedic. And he should be starting either Thursday or Friday this week. We gave positions to three EMTs, and they'll be starting first part of October. Otherwise, working on the budget, working on staffing for 2019.
All right. I got to make some notes here. So currently, we have a need for 5 full-time paramedics, and we have 4 with this new hire.
Correct.
EMTs, we have a need for,
We always have a need for
no,
EMTs.
give me a number.
Endless. Endless amount. There's not a set number of EMTs that we're looking for.
But I thought we had some full-time EMTs. No.
No. We have our .6s that we have. We have,
Let me ask the question a little bit different. Do we have sufficient .6s to meet the staffing level needs?
yes and no.
Are we not meeting our staffing level needs? And the answer to that is yes, correct?
That we are not meeting them?
Yeah.
Correct. Well, some
So
days.
how many more?
Not 100%.
So how many .6 more do we need probably to be able to do that?
That's null and void for the rest of this year. .6 is, it's null and void for the rest of the year. It doesn't, .6 is what's killed us as far as our caps that we place on our EMTs.
I'll go back to when originally, when Brandon was worrying about the budget way back in March and April, we were working some people longer, knowing that potentially at the end of the year we might have a problem. Is that still an issue, Brenda?
Kevin just stepped out, so I'll answer that. The city had the option to relax those hours, and so he relaxed that for those 2 EMTs, so
Okay.
that they could work
Okay, that
more
was my
hours
only
for the end of the
concern.
year
Was
because
that
we
gonna be
needed
an
coverage.
issue? Okay.
Correct.
That's not an issue. It's a non-issue. Good. Thank you. Does the rest of the commission understand what I just asked? They had a policy in the city that you could pay. You want to answer that?
The EMTs needed to stay below a certain number of hours per week or per year, and Devin made the decision in order to get staffing for St. Croix EMS right now that we would relax that hours per week until the end of the year, and we'd relook at it because we needed staffing.
And I agree. Because what he told us back in first quarter or thereabouts was we can absorb these people working more hours, but that can't continue all the way to the end of the year. And yet, obviously, we've continued that toward the end of the year. And I wanted to know if that was all of a sudden we're going to get to November and say there's 6 people that can't work anymore. You know, that was my concern. Okay. Been relaxed. All right. Anything else, Josh?
Nothing.
So the answer to this .6 is we still need more. Will we keep hiring more?
Yeah. I've hired.
Advertising?
Since, yes, we are. We actually are advertising. Since probably our last meeting when we hired, probably 4 more additional EMTs that are all cleared and on the street. I just brought another one on. And he started last week, I believe. We got 2 more that are starting beginning of October, so people are coming. So just slow.
Okay. Future agenda items.
So I don't know if this qualifies as a future agenda item, but I just want to be very candid. So a lot of stuff I've been reading in the newspapers. I read about Brandon in the newspaper. I read about Joe in the newspaper. I read about the towns and the villages and that kind of stuff. Everything I'm getting is through the newspaper or what I'm hearing off the street. I haven't heard any correspondence or anything through the EMS Commission on any of the stuff that we really need to know. And do you feel that the way we want to continue? Because I don't know what I'm getting information from different sources. And has there been any correspondence coming out of the commission on any of those things? Okay.
Oh, you're right.
Is it an expectation of mine as a commission member to get it through the commission, or should I continue to rely on outside sources for my information? It's more of a point of discussion. I'm not being critical or judgmental. I just noticed that what I hear is typically through people on the street or through people I work with or through the newspaper, and I don't even know what's what anymore. in all honesty.
And it goes back to the note that I sent you earlier, Tim, about potentially getting a meeting together. Now, I know that you had travel.
I was gone by this time.
Soon after Brandon resigned, and when we brought Joe on, I thought, at this point, we should meet as a commission to talk about this.
Yeah.
Now, my bad for not following up and saying, hey, let's get an agenda item that can talk about this with the next meeting. But I was really pushing for a meeting earlier than this date to talk through what the changes
Bill,
are
I'm not
happening.
pointing fingers or
No,
anything.
and
I'm trying to
I know
clarify.
you're not, but I'm just saying that, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Because otherwise, if we're all getting information from different sources and different times and those type of things, we're not going to be very cohesive as a commission. So I would suggest we even meet more often than we are, perhaps.
I agree. Just to help you, before you came on board, sometime back in Eric's era, we were still meeting quarterly then. And then at one point, I think it was after Eric left and Kim came on, we decided as a commission we should meet monthly. And we did, up until about March of this year. Brandon said, don't need to meet monthly, because you had the ad hoc committee that was almost meeting monthly, and they were creating direction somewhat for the council based on the information they were working on. So that's why we had them coming here, and Brandon says we can meet quarterly. And I kind of felt the same way you did, Bill. With all the changes going down, we weren't meeting frequently enough. And the answer to that, short, sweet, yes, we should meet monthly at least, from now until whenever.
Can I put a few things on our radar for the next agenda?
Yes.
Just to kind of circle back, the medical director at the meeting, I would really like to see
Yep,
Aaron
I
here
agree.
at the next meeting. Look, whatever you're hearing, Tom, from Lakeview, and I understand Josh's point about competition, but at the end of the day, we're in a relationship together because of where we are. And I think it would be imperative to have them at this next meeting or a future meeting to discuss what their thoughts are about, is there substance to what they're thinking? Because I think we all need to be on the same page when it comes to transfers, when it comes to 911. Because if there's animosity now, it sounds like there's a little bit of animosity. I think we need to talk through that as a commission, whether that's the next meeting or the meeting after.
I would agree, the relationship has to be strong, and if it's starting to take a left turn here, we want to avoid that. We're all here for the same reason. We want to make this work, and we've said many times, we want St. Croix EMS to be successful. We're here to help, and it sounds like people are reaching out now for help when we say for Lakeview. So I would be more than happy to partner with Josh to see who that would be. And
Do you think that that's a non-meeting, not a commission meeting then?
I don't think it needs to be discussed in a commission meeting right away.
Got it.
I mean, I think the
maybe
meeting,
some merit in having
I think the meeting can happen,
some of our other.
and then we bring back to the commission.
Perfect, even better.
I tend to agree. The more I thought, as I'm listening to this conversation, that's a more important meeting than just a commission meeting, and ought to be a separate meeting. And do we have the right players out there? If we're having those discussions, should it be Ted Wegleitner, John Mueller, you? We ought to have the council members. Maybe we have to have all of the municipality members together in one large meeting in a room to talk about it.
Yeah.
From each municipality, so that we all are on the same page, because you're right. It's a community service that we're providing to our residents, and how is that service going to move forward in the future?
Lakeview's approach has been to listen and to tell what services they can provide and how they would provide them. It's not a sales pitch, not trying to impose their will on anyone. And so what we want to do is avoid that at all costs, that it doesn't become it could transform into that very quickly in terms of who can provide what and that type of thing. We want to avoid this because it's not a sales pitch on their part by any stretch.
And then I have one more agenda item. Thank you. So with the non-confidence that I'm hearing in St. Croix EMS, I would like to call for a vote for a new chair for the EMS Commission at the next meeting.
Okay, that's fine. Anything else? Well, I'll go back up to, we'll do the minutes, financial report, ad hoc committee update, action on, well, that line item with, how do we want to put it on there? What do we want to discuss? Discussion possible action in non-renewal. It's contract ambulance service for St. Croix EMS and the municipality partners. We ought to have a line item to discuss that.
At the next meeting.
Yeah, agenda
Because
line
at that
item.
point, you'll know what the council has decided.
Yeah.
Right?
Hopefully, yes.
I mean, I would assume that you sending that letter on Friday, we
Will
have to have that
cause
discussion on our next
discussion.
meeting, which is next week, Monday.
Oh, okay, okay.
Whether a decision happens in that meeting, I
Right,
don't know.
yeah. Update on the RFP for billing. Should have an answer by our next meeting, hopefully. The facilities would come off until such time as we hear from a consultant. And I don't know when they're gonna hire, if you're gonna hire a consultant, based on all these discussions. You know what I mean?
In terms of the study you're talking about now, or in
Yeah,
terms
yeah.
of, I don't know if we can really discuss, I mean,
No,
it's not a line
no,
item,
but as far
we
as,
should talk
because
about
what
it.
that does is that moves, I'd say take the RFP for the facilities off until we have a better date.
Again, you're talking about the next agenda. Yes, I
Yeah,
agree.
yeah.
I agree.
Do you want to put down a, do we need to discuss the remount again, or no?
Hopefully not.
Okay. Budget, yes. Staffing, yes. Medical director, yes. Plus request that he be here to discuss things. Do we, this is a naive question. Do we have a new interim chief?
We do not.
Okay, didn't know, because I've been out of the country.
We have asked Josh to remain as managing and being,
Operations supervisor.
absolutely. We will be having that conversation soon as a council, however.
Okay, okay. So you would be doing the operations report, okay?
Would that be a topic for the next meeting, the interim chief? Did I hear that correctly as a future?
You know, we
thing?
should put that on there, on the agenda, barring the
Interim chief?
Interim chief,
Interim chief position.
because I think, I mean, we can always take it off if we haven't come up to a decision on the council, or it could be a conversation.
If we go back just a second to the consultant, where did that land? I know my
You
recollection.
left.
What's that?
You left.
So, right. So the EMS commission voted not to do a study, or not at least to fund a study.
Motion failed here.
Motion failed. It was a 50-50 vote. The council decided to move forward
That's what it
with a
was.
study. So
Okay. But it's kind of on hold at the time, or
we have advertised, and that's
it's
where-
moving, just, okay. It hasn't been, okay, thanks.
Anything else? Anybody? Date. Currently, we have a October 23rd at 7:30. Too early, too late?
I think too late. Personally, I think we should be meeting sooner than that.
Okay,
We could have budget numbers pretty dang soon. I mean, it's,
yeah.
we could pass our budgets.
Well, we were hoping to have the budgets finalized by then, you're right,
Right.
originally.
I mean, could we meet the week of the 8th?
The 9th, let's say. I work, well, even if we had to, we could meet Monday. If we're meeting at 7:30. Monday or Tuesday? Wednesday, Thursday, and Fridays are tough for me.
I'm good either Monday or Tuesday.
What date?
Monday or Tuesday, the 8th or 9th, 7:30.
Tuesday's better for me.
For me as well.
Tuesday, 7:30, the 9th.
Does that work for you?
So it'd be Tuesday?
Yep,
Okay.
What time? Same time?
7:30. So, do we want to talk about a different agenda for that meeting? Or do you want to have all this stuff in there, including budget discussions? Well, let's leave it the way it is, and,
We can always take
right,
off.
yeah, we won't discuss it if we don't need to. Yeah, I
Correct.
agree. It's easier to do that than the other way.
I would really sincerely like to have Aaron here at that meeting.
Oh, I agree, Aaron should still be here.
Who can touch base with Dr. Burnett?
She has before. Anything else? I move we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.